Across deserts and mountains, empires clashed. Welcome to the deadliest civilizations in history. Great civilizations rose and fell: Rome, Mongolia, China, Assyria, and the Aztec Empire. But which one stands above the rest? Across the deserts and mountains, great powers rose and fell. Now, we rank the 5 most influential empires. Across deserts, mountains, and great cities, the ancient world was defined by constant warfare and upheaval. From the ashes of these ancient empires, we measure their legacy. We look now to the scale of conquest, brutality, and historical impact. Outside the great walls of the capital, the armies of Assyria assembled. This marked the 5th year of the campaign. With iron weaponry and disciplined formations, the Assyrian army dominated Mesopotamia and the Near East. As the Assyrian armies marched, neighboring kingdoms could only watch in fearful silence, knowing their time was short. From their walled cities in Mesopotamia, the Assyrians carved out an empire, their conquests etched forever in stone.
Historians have tried to rank the deadliest civilizations in ancient history, and the empire that came out on top wasn't the one most people expect. It's not Rome, it's not the Mongols, technically not even ancient, and it's definitely not the one you're picturing right now. Every ancient civilization had violence baked into somewhere. That was basically the price of survival back then. But some civilizations didn't just fight wars, they built entire systems around conquest, terror, and body counts so extreme that historians still argue about the actual numbers today. So today, we're ranking the deadliest civilizations in ancient history based on scale of conquest, brutality of methods, and lasting historical impact. And the empire at number 1 might genuinely surprise you. Starting things off at number 5, the ancient Assyrians. The Assyrian Empire, centered in what's now northern Iraq, dominated the Near East for centuries. And they didn't just conquer through military strength, they conquered through a very deliberate, very public strategy of terror. Assyrian kings left behind detailed written and carved records, bragging openly about mass executions, flaying enemies alive, and building pyramids out of severed heads outside conquered cities. This wasn't hidden or downplayed, it was propaganda. The entire point was to make the next city surrender without a fight, because they'd already heard exactly what happened to the last one that resisted. Entire populations were also frequently deported, forcibly relocated hundreds of miles from their homeland, a tactic used to break resistance and prevent future rebellions. Some historians estimate millions of people were displaced this way over the empire's history. The Assyrians didn't just want to win wars, they wanted a reputation so terrifying that most of their enemies gave up before the fighting even started. And for a few centuries, it worked incredibly well. At number 4, we're going all the way to Mesoamerica and an empire whose entire religious system depended on a constant, staggering amount of death. The Aztec Empire, which dominated central Mexico in the century before European contact, built an entire civilization around ritual human sacrifice on a scale that's honestly difficult to comprehend. At the dedication of the Great Temple in Tenochtitlan in 1487, some historical accounts, largely written after the fact by Spanish chroniclers and with numbers that are heavily debated by modern historians, describe thousands of people being sacrificed over the course of several days. Even taking those inflated numbers with heavy skepticism, which most serious historians do, archaeological evidence still confirms that sacrifice happened on a massive, sustained scale. Year after year is a core part of Aztec religious life. The reasoning behind it was deeply tied to their worldview. The Aztecs believed the sun literally required human blood to keep rising each day, meaning sacrifice wasn't seen as cruelty, it was seen as a cosmic necessity, keeping the entire universe from collapsing. This is a genuinely important distinction historians make. The Aztecs weren't sadistic for no reason. They were operating inside a belief system where mass sacrifice was viewed as sacred duty, not senseless violence. But the sheer scale of death involved still earns them a firm place on this list. Comment below which civilization on this list you'd be least surprised to learn more horrifying details about. At number 3, an empire so vast, so fast-moving, that it may have killed a larger percentage of the entire world's population than any conflict in history, including the World Wars. The Mongol Empire, built primarily by Genghis Khan and his successors starting in the early 1200s, expanded faster and further than almost any empire before or since, eventually stretching from China all the way to Eastern Europe. That expansion came at an almost unimaginable human cost. Some historians estimate the Mongol conquests killed somewhere between 30 and 40 million people, and because the global population at the time was so much smaller than today, some researchers argue this may represent one of the highest percentages of the total population ever wiped out by a single set of conquests. The Mongols were also strategic about terror, similar to the Assyrians centuries earlier. Cities that surrendered peacefully were often left largely intact. Cities that resisted were frequently destroyed entirely, sometimes with the full population massacred, specifically so that word would spread and the next city wouldn't dare fight back. The Mongol Empire eventually became one of the largest contiguous land empires in human history, but it was built on a foundation of conquest so devastating that its death toll remains debated and studied by historians to this day. At number 2, and this one surprises a lot of people, the Roman Empire. Rome doesn't usually get grouped in conversations about the deadliest civilizations, mostly because we tend to remember it for aqueducts, roads, and togas, instead of what actually built and maintained that empire for so many centuries: relentless, sustained military conquest. Rome's wars of expansion killed millions of people across multiple continents over hundreds of years. The conquest of Gaul alone, led by Julius Caesar, is estimated by some ancient sources, though these numbers are debated by modern historians, to have resulted in over 1 million deaths and another million people enslaved. And then there's the Colosseum, which functioned essentially as an entertainment venue built around public death. Historians estimate hundreds of thousands of people and possibly over 1 million animals were killed inside Roman arenas across the empire's history, all as spectacle, all as public entertainment for paying crowds. Rome also relied heavily on slavery to function, with some historians estimating that slaves made up somewhere between 10 and 30% of the empire's entire population at different points in its history, a system built on forced labor, violence, and control. Rome gets remembered for its architecture and its legal system, and both of those things are genuinely impressive and worth studying. But underneath all of that, it was also one of the most sustained, most efficient killing machines in ancient history, responsible for millions of deaths across an empire that lasted for centuries. Which brings us to number 1, and this civilization's death toll comes from something nobody expects when they think of ancient empires: Han China, specifically the transition period surrounding its collapse. The Han dynasty ruled China for roughly 400 years, and for much of that time it was one of the most advanced, most prosperous civilizations on the entire planet. But its collapse and the chaos that followed may represent one of the deadliest events in all of ancient history, largely because of scale. Chinese census records suggest the population dropped from around 56 million people to roughly 16 million over a period of only a few decades during the chaos surrounding the Han dynasty's fall in the late 2nd and early 3rd century CE. That's a loss of tens of millions of people in an extraordinarily short window of time. Now, historians heavily debate how much of that population drop came from actual warfare versus disease, famine, and mass displacement that all happened simultaneously during that same chaotic period, often called the Era of the Three Kingdoms. Ancient census data from this period is also notoriously unreliable, and some historians believe the numbers reflect people fleeing registration and taxation rather than literal death. But even accounting for that uncertainty, most historians agree that the scale of death during this period, whether from war, famine, disease, or some devastating combination of all three, may represent one of the single deadliest events in the entire ancient world, simply because of how enormous the starting population was. It's a genuinely unsettling reminder that some of the deadliest periods in ancient history didn't come from the civilizations most famous for brutality. They came from a Golden Age civilization completely collapsing in on itself. So, across every one of these, an empire that turned terror into a public relations strategy, a civilization that built mass sacrifice into its entire understanding of the universe, conquests so fast and violent they may have altered the percentage of humans alive on Earth, an empire remembered for architecture that was equally built on relentless conquest and slavery, and finally, a golden age that collapsed so violently that it may have killed tens of millions of people in a matter of decades. One thing stays consistent. Every single one of these built something impressive: roads, temples, empires, art, systems of government we still study today, and every single one of them was also responsible for death on a scale that's genuinely difficult to process. History rarely gives us purely good or purely evil civilizations. It gives us complicated ones, capable of incredible achievement and horrifying violence, often at the exact same time. If you want more videos ranking and breaking down the ancient world's most extreme moments, go ahead and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep making these. And let me know in the comments which civilization on this list you think deserved the #1 spot instead. I'll see you in the next one.